The light streaked across the sky. Chen transformed into a rainbow of light, cutting through the sky. The wounds on his back had fully healed by this point, a recovery so complete that even he was a little surprised. Clearly, this remarkable healing ability was due to the undying fire integrated into his spiritual energy. If this had been before, Chen would certainly have needed some time to rest and recuperate before being able to continue his journey. The undying fire is indeed mysterious. Chen couldn't help but praise. He then turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, a hint of nostalgia in his expression. It seemed he hadn't quite recovered from the shock of learning that Lin Jing was actually the little princess of the martial realm. What's wrong? You can't bear to leave. The Nine Nether appeared beside him, her captivating eyes fixed on him. The martial realm is far stronger than the great Luo heaven domain. You turn that down. Chen smiled faintly and replied, perhaps in the martial realm, I would have protection, and no one would dare to provoke me. But so what? The legendary power I seek isn't attained that way. At this point, Chen narrowed his eyes slightly, a smile curling on his lips. And, since that martial ancestor has reached such a level, why can't I do the same? You really have quite the ambition. Nine Nether raised an eyebrow, her voice laced with amusement. Haha, though I might be a little overconfident right now, without this kind of courage, how can I ever talk about becoming a legendary powerhouse? Chen laughed heartily, his black eyes filled with a spark of confidence. Nine Nether smiled faintly in response. She then looked into the distance, her gaze distant. The next city should have a teleportation spirit array leading to the Tian Luo continent. After that, we'll finally be able to end this 2-month-long journey. Chen secretly sighed in relief. These 2 months had been exhausting, but at least it was nearly over. Chen clenched his hand, and the Xun'er bracelet that he had taken from Liu Ming earlier appeared in his grasp. He poured his spiritual energy into it, and soon, 2 glowing orbs appeared in his hand. Inside these orbs floated a blazing sun and a withered leaf, both hovering silently, emanating strange spiritual energy fluctuations. Chen's gaze grew intense as he looked at them, a smile tugging at his lips. A wave of excitement surged in his heart. He had finally gathered the 3 materials needed to cultivate the Great Sun indestructible body. It hadn't been easy. Chen couldn't help but reflect that if he had stayed at the Northern Song Spiritual Academy, he likely would never have been able to gather all the materials. When are you planning to begin cultivating the Supreme Dharmakaya? Nine Nether also stared at the 2 glowing orbs before speaking. If Chen truly planned to compete for the leadership position in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, he would inevitably face a fierce contest. His competitors would undoubtedly be top-tier figures from the Great Luo Heaven Domain, their strength on par with, or even surpassing Liu Ming, who had relied on resources to reach his current level. Therefore, if Chen wanted to have any chance of success, he would at least need to cultivate his Supreme Dharmakaya. Without it, he would be at a severe disadvantage. Mastering the Supreme Dharmakaya isn't something that can be done in a day or 2. I'll begin cultivating it once we reach the Great Luo Heaven Domain, Chen murmured. The Great Sun indestructible body he was cultivating was no simple matter. No one knew what kind of challenges might arise during the process. Since they were alone in the wilderness, if any trouble came up that disrupted his cultivation, it could result in significant losses. After all, if he failed, the 3 materials he had gathered would be destroyed along with his efforts. Nine Nether nodded lightly. Then let's speed up. She looked into the distance, a hint of nostalgia flashing in her narrow, beautiful eyes. It had been many years since she had left the Great Luo Heaven Domain. She wondered what had become of her 9 Nether Palace. Both of them released a surge of powerful spiritual energy, and in an instant, their figures turned into streaks of light, racing across the sky with the speed of lightning. In the blink of an eye, they had disappeared from sight. On the Tian Luo continent, at the Celestial Profound Hall. The Celestial Profound Hall was located in the northern part of the Tian Luo continent. As one of the top forces on the continent, it held a prestigious position, with vast territories under its control. In this vast territory, the Celestial Profound Hall is the sole ruler. While other forces do exist beneath it, all of them rely on the Celestial Profound Hall for survival. Every year, They must offer large amounts of supreme spiritual liquid as tribute. At this moment, in the heart of the celestial profound hall, a towering golden palace stands, surrounded by swirling clouds. The golden light emanates, resembling an immortal realm, majestic yet ethereal. At the deepest part of the palace, a place filled with spiritual radiance, there appears to be a glowing lotus. At the center of this lotus sits a figure, quietly meditating. The figure seems like a boulder. His breathing is extremely rhythmic. Each time he exhales and inhales, the sound of wind and thunder echoes throughout the hall, and the vast spiritual energy roars like an ocean. Suddenly, the figure, immersed in his cultivation, opens his eyes. The light in his gaze seems to tear through space, and a fierce look of anger flashes across his face. He stretches out his hand, revealing an ancient jade pendant. At this moment, the glow of the pendant is gradually dimming. The divine soul seal of Xun'er is weakening. How bold! Someone actually dares to harm my son, Liu Tiandao. The figure's eyes blaze with sharp fury, and his deep voice causes violent winds to stir in the hall. He flicks his finger, and the ancient jade pendant floats up. The figure performs a hand seal, wrapping the pendant in spiritual light, intending to locate Liu Ming's whereabouts. However, after a moment of probing, the pendant still shows no response, and no information is transmitted. Unable to locate? Impossible, the figure exclaims in surprise. He suddenly stands up, and the spiritual light around him retracts. He is a middle-aged man wearing a green robe. His eyes are as deep as the starry sky, and every gesture he makes exudes a terrifying oppressive force. This man is the lord of the celestial profound hall, and a renowned top-tier expert on the Tianluo continent, Liu Tiandao. At this moment, his expression is dark, his gaze flickering slightly. Liu Ming must have fallen into some kind of predicament, and the person who attacked him must be extraordinarily powerful. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to block his probing. I will see who dares to lay a hand on my son. Liu Tiandao sneers coldly, then waves his sleeve. A massive 8-trigram disc appears, and he flicks his finger, shattering the divine soul seal. A beam of light shoots out, entering the 8-trigram disc. Buzz! The 8-trigram disc immediately begins to spin, and countless mysterious light patterns emerge, enveloping the golden light. The space above the trigrams warps slightly, as if it is penetrating space to investigate something. The space distorts further until a small tear in the fabric of space rips open. Seeing this, Liu Tiandao steps forward, and his figure vanishes in an instant. Shan continent, the place where Liu Ming is being suppressed. The space here suddenly warps. Moments later, a figure steps out, appearing in the sky. His sharp gaze sweeps across the land and finally locks onto the ground below. In his eyes, spiritual light gathers, as if it has pierced through the earth, revealing a spiritual mountain peak buried deep within. Heaven and earth phenomenon. Could it be that a Earth Supreme is behind this? Liu Tiandao's face changes slightly, then his eyes blaze with fury. He sneers coldly and waves his sleeve again. Immediately, the ground below splits apart. As the earth splits, a massive spiritual energy mountain rises into view. Liu Tiandao moves and lands on the peak of the spiritual energy mountain. He forms a hand seal, and a beam of light shoots out, enveloping the mountain. He intends to dissolve the mountain's spiritual energy, returning it to its most primal form. However, as time passes, Liu Tiandao's expression grows darker. He realizes that his efforts are having little effect. Inside the spiritual energy mountain, it seems that some force is resisting him. Within that force, there is the will of the mysterious expert who intervened. Such ruthless methods. Liu Tiandao's face turns icy. Although Liu Tiandao possessed the strength of an Earth Supreme, he was temporarily unable to melt away the spiritual energy mountain. If he attempted to forcibly break it, he would likely harm Liu Ming, who was suppressed beneath it. It seemed that this time, Liu Ming had offended someone he shouldn't have. Whoever you are, even if my son is wrong, it is not for you to suppress him. Liu Tiandao's eyes flickered. He then snorted coldly, sweeping his sleeve as he turned to leave. Since this mysterious powerhouse wanted to duel with him, he would gladly accept the challenge. Once he retrieved the sacred artifact from the hall, He didn't believe the will lingering within the spiritual energy mountain could stand against him. As Lu Tiandao departed, the land once again rumbled back to life, and the massive mountain was buried once more beneath the earth. Meanwhile, the main characters, Mu Chun and Nine Nether, remained unaware of these events. They quickly arrived at the next city and activated the teleportation spirit array. The moment the array was activated, Mu Chun couldn't help but take a deep breath. His eyes gleamed with intense anticipation. Tian Luo Continent, here I come. My path as a powerhouse begins here. Tian Luo Continent. As one of the most renowned supercontinents in the Great Thousand Worlds, this continent's vastness and prosperity far exceeded Mu Chen's expectations. Countless forces dotted the land like stars, and the level of chaos was enough to amaze anyone. And precisely because of its complexity, Tian Luo Continent had never seen any force dominated. No power had ever achieved such a feat. Even a heavenly supreme-level powerhouse would find it impossible to unify the continent. The continent was simply too vast, and its hidden experts too numerous. No one knew if a superpower was secretly residing in the remote mountains and forests. Thus, Tian Luo Continent had always been a land of competing forces. While constant battles raged, with countless forces being swallowed up daily, new ones also sprang up like bamboo shoots after rain, continuously bringing fresh blood and vitality to the continent. Amidst such chaos, many geniuses emerged, rising to prominence. Great Luo Heaven Domain. As one of the top forces on Tian Luo Continent, it too controlled an extraordinarily vast territory. Its expanse far exceeded that of the North San Continent. However, when viewed from the perspective of the entire Tian Luo Continent, it could only be considered a small corner of the land. Thus, when Mu Chen first arrived at Tian Luo Continent, he spent nearly a week traveling and passed through 10 teleportation spirit arrays before finally nearing the territory of Great Luo Heaven Domain. After 2 more days of travel, he finally entered the headquarters region of Great Luo Heaven Domain. Great Luo Heaven. Standing atop a towering mountain, Mu Chen lifted his gaze and stared ahead. His handsome face was filled with astonishment as he beheld an island floating in the sky. But rather than calling it a floating island, it resembled a small continent. Its grandeur left him dumbfounded. The floating continent was surrounded by a brilliant energy shield, and there were countless palaces within it. Streams of light darted across the sky, and the overwhelming formation array was especially intimidating. Even from a distance, Mu Chun could faintly sense countless powerful spiritual energy fluctuations emanating from within. This is the headquarters of Great Luo Heaven Domain. Great Luo Heaven. Nine Nether stood beside Mu Chun. With one hand shielding her eyes and the other resting on her slender waist, her long, graceful figure was impossible to ignore. Her white neck, full and rounded chest, narrow waist, and captivating curves created an incredibly tempting silhouette. Even Mu Chun, who had only glanced at her, couldn't help but be drawn in for a moment. Truly impressive, Mu Chun quickly diverted his gaze to avoid angering Nine Nether, then sincerely complimented. Compared to this Great Luo Heaven, even the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy seemed lacking. Great Luo Heaven Domain's reputation was well-deserved. Let's go. Nine Nether smiled enchantingly. Mu Chun also nodded. He gazed at the floating Great Luo Heaven ahead, his palms slowly tightening into a fist. His journey in this vast world would begin from here. The Nine Nether took the lead and rushed toward the distant Great Luo Heaven in the sky. Mu Chun closely followed her. As they drew nearer, the Great Luo Heaven began to come into clearer view, and Mu Chun could feel its vastness. No matter how far he looked, he couldn't see the end, only countless streams of light flying through it. High above the Great Luo Heaven, a massive spiritual array hovered in the air. It turned into a glowing shield that enveloped the entire Great Luo Heaven, its terrifying spiritual energy causing ripples. Even the space around it was constantly warping. This is the Sect Guardian Spirit Array of the Great Luo Heaven, Nine Nether said, pointing to the array. It's said that even Earth Supreme experts find it difficult to break. Mu Chun nodded. He could already sense that this array was no ordinary formation. Outside the Great Luo Heaven, there was a massive light gate, roughly 1,000 meters tall. A radiant path stretched from it, leading directly into the Great Luo Heaven. This was the only passage into the Great Luo Heaven. 9 Nether and Mu Chun landed before the Grand Light Gate. Stop! The Great Luo Heaven forbids unauthorized entry. Violators will be executed on sight. Just as they landed, a sharp shout echoed through the air. Over 100 figures, dressed in black armor with fierce eyes, flashed into view. Holding long spears, they aimed them directly at the two. A murderous aura silently emanated from their bodies. 9 Nether's face remained calm. She casually raised her hand, and a black light shot out, landing in the hand of the black-armored captain leading the group. The light faded, revealing a dark token with the image of a soaring black sparrow. A faint chirping sound seemed to come from it. The 9 Nether token? The black-armored captain stared at the token in shock. He quickly knelt on one knee, and the hundreds of black-armored warriors behind him also kneeled in unison, the sound of their armored knees hitting the ground ringing loudly. Greetings, 9 Nether King. 9 Nether waved her hand, and the token flew back into her palm. She gave a faint nod, then led Mu Chun through the light gate, disappearing at the end of the glowing path. Once she left, the black-armored warriors stood up in perfect unison. Captain, was that the 9 Nether King, the one who has been missing for years? One of the black-armored warriors whispered to their captain. Yes, with the 9 Nether token. Who else could she be? The captain nodded, watching 9 Nether disappear. I heard the 9 Nether King was the weakest among the 9 kings at first. But she comes from the 9 Nether Sparrow clan and has been under the protection of the Heavenly Vulture Emperor, which helped her become one of the 9 kings. However, I sensed an oppressive aura from her just now, as strong as any of the other 8 kings. It seems she has successfully overcome her tribulation. But things haven't been going well for the 9 Nether Palace in recent years. If it weren't for the Heavenly Vulture Emperor's influence, it might have been disbanded by now. The 9 Nether Palace has become nothing more than a decoration. A black-armored warrior sighed. Yeah, even the commander of the 9 Nether Palace, whom the 9 Nether King personally promoted, has switched allegiance to the Blood Eagle King. It was the 9 Nether King who saved him from the battlefield and provided him with plenty of cultivation resources. Without that, he wouldn't be where he is today. Indeed, what a thankless wretch. These whispers went unheard by 9 Nether and Mu Chun. After passing through the glowing path, the light before them grew brighter, and the magnificent Great Luo Heaven appeared clearly before their eyes. Mu Chun couldn't help but marvel at the grand scene in front of him. Where should we go first? Mu Chun asked as he approached 9 Nether. Let's go to my 9 Nether Palace. It's my domain. I wonder how things have been there after all these years, 9 Nether said with a smile. She gazed longingly at the northwest direction. You have your own palace? Mu Chun was a bit surprised. Of course, I'm one of the 9 kings. My position in the Great Luo Heaven is not low. 9 Nether rolled her eyes at him, then said arrogantly. So from now on, when you see me, you better act like those people back there. Otherwise, you'll be committing an offense. Mu Chun chuckled, not giving her any face. The 9 Nether raised her small fist at him, then couldn't help but smile gently. She stopped joking with Mu Chun and turned, flying directly toward the northwest. Mu Chun followed closely behind. In the sky above the Great Luo Heaven, beams of light occasionally streaked across, forming orderly shadows. These were the patrol squads of the Great Luo Heaven, guarding against any unusual occurrences. Mu Chun glanced at those squads, their formation disciplined and sharp, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. After speeding along for about half an hour, 9 Nether finally slowed down. Mu Chun looked up and saw a towering mountain that reached the clouds. The mountain vaguely resembled a giant bird, its wings spread wide, blocking the sky and sun. At the peak of the mountain, a majestic and continuous palace stood. 9 Nether gazed at the palace, a smile spreading across her delicate face. She moved her body and appeared directly above the palace. Before the palace, there was a vast training ground where over 1,000 figures sat in meditation. At the front of these figures, 2 girls were seated. One girl wore black training attire, while the other was dressed in a light red robe. Both girls had stunningly beautiful faces, but what was most astonishing was that their features were identical, clearly a pair of twin sisters. Among the two, the girl in black appeared slightly colder, while the one in the light red robe seemed softer and more delicate. It was this contrast, identical faces with different auras, that made them even more captivating. At least, many of the practitioners on the field couldn't help but sneak a glance at them. Suddenly, the girl in black snapped her eyes open. A cold and sharp gleam flashed in her eyes as she raised her head abruptly and said in a low voice, "Who goes there?" All the practitioners on the field immediately became alert, their spiritual energy swirling around them. Little Binger really is getting stronger. A gentle laugh rang out from the sky, followed by a graceful figure slowly descending, landing before the palace. The girl in black stared blankly at the descending figure. The coldness and sharpness in her eyes melted almost instantly, and her eyes reddened with emotion. The softer girl beside her also looked at the woman before her in disbelief. In the next moment, she rushed forward, her beautiful eyes red and puffy like a rabbit's. "Nine Nether, sister, you've finally come back." Nine Nether embraced the girl who had rushed into her arms. Looking at their red eyes, she felt a bit of sourness in her nose. She gently rubbed the girl's head and whispered, "Yes, sister is back." In front of the palace, the over 1,000 figures froze, staring at the suddenly appeared Nine Nether. After a brief moment, they all knelt on one knee, and the sound of their respectful voices reverberated through the air. "Welcome, mistress, back to the palace." Their voices were filled with overwhelming joy. No one had expected that the mistress of the Nine Nether Palace would return at this time. They had all thought that she would never come back. Hearing the thunderous cheers, Nine Nether was slightly surprised. When she left, there weren't nearly as many people in the Nine Nether Palace, and because she wasn't good at managing, it was often quite chaotic. She never imagined it would have such grandeur now. "You two sisters have done very well. To have managed the Nine Nether Palace like this," Nine Nether said with a smile, holding the girl in her arms. "It's all thanks to sister," the girl in the light red robe said, rubbing her red eyes, feeling a bit embarrassed. Nine Nether smiled at the girl in black. The latter bit her lip, and the sharpness and coldness in her eyes had all but vanished. Though she was clearly excited, she remained composed and gently bowed, saying, "Welcome back, mistress. Little Binger, I told you to call me sister." Nine Nether held the girl's small hand with affection in her eyes and said, "I'm sure these years have been tough for you both. Don't blame me. I almost didn't make it back." "Mistress." The girl in black quickly shook her head, but when she saw Nine Nether's gaze, she hurriedly corrected herself. "How could I blame sister? When you left, you entrusted the Nine Nether Palace to us sisters. Nine Nether Palace was merely a formality, and you're such a stubborn girl," Nine Nether said helplessly. Back then, her strength was the weakest among the Nine Kings. So many people in the Great Luo Heaven Domain were dissatisfied with her royal status. However, due to the existence of the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and her powerful background, they did not dare voice their objections. But once she left, with the abilities of these two girls, they would undoubtedly face many hardships. And Tang Bing, this girl, was particularly strong-willed, so if she encountered any mistreatment, she would surely grit her teeth and endure. Thinking back over these years, the two sisters must have swallowed a lot of anger in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Nine Nether couldn't help but feel some sympathy. By the way, Nine Nether glanced around, as if remembering something. Her brows furrowed slightly as she asked, "Where's Chow Feng? I instructed him to assist you when he left back then." Upon hearing that name, both girls' faces changed slightly. The girl named Tang Bing, dressed in black, bit her red lips tightly. After hesitating for a moment, she finally took a deep breath and said, "Sister, Chow Feng, he's already joined Blood Hawk King. He's left Nine Nether Palace." As soon as she finished speaking, Nine Nether's previously smiling face stiffened slightly, and the atmosphere immediately grew tense. The fragile girl in Nine Nether's arms also bit her red lips and said angrily, "That Chow Feng is an ingrate. As soon as he learned that you, sister, had been missing for years, he left Nine Nether Palace and joined Blood Hawk King. To think that when we saved him from the pile of corpses back then, he's forgotten everything. If it weren't for you, sister, he wouldn't have had what he has today." Nine Nether gently patted the girl's small head and sighed. "I know Chow Feng is very ambitious, but I never thought he'd be unable to hold on for even these few years." There was some disappointment in her voice. The young man had gone through a lot of suffering back then, and that was why she had helped him out of pity. But in the end, his character was still disappointing. Sister, don't worry, I'll never let that traitor go. Tang Bing gritted her silver teeth. Although Nether wasn't particularly upset by Chao Feng's betrayal, she couldn't tolerate it. Their family had been slaughtered by an enemy clan during a war. If it weren't for Nether, their fate would have been worse than death. So for them, Nether was the closest person they had, and they couldn't bear anything that harmed her. If Nether Palace weren't so weak, and if her strength hadn't always been one step away from breaking through to the Supreme Realm, they would never let that traitor go so easily. Nether just smiled. She wasn't particularly sad about Chao Feng's betrayal. After all, in her heart, she cared more about the two sisters in front of her. Their perseverance had given her great comfort. I won't abandon you two so easily in the future. Nether smiled, and then focused her gaze on Tang Bing. Little Binger, it seems you haven't broken through to the Supreme Realm yet. When she left back then, Tang Bing's strength had already reached the heaven-reaching stage, and she was only one step away from overcoming the 3 minor tribulations. With her talent and the resources of the great Luo Heaven domain, it was impossible for her to have not broken through to the Supreme Realm by now. Tang Bing's face flushed slightly as she nodded gently. Nether, don't blame me. These years, I've never used a drop of supreme spiritual liquid in my cultivation. All the supreme spiritual liquids we received from the great Luo Heaven domain were used to cultivate the new disciples in the palace. Otherwise, Nether Palace wouldn't be in its current state. The girl in the light red clothes, named Tang Ro, quickly defended her sister. Nether was stunned upon hearing this, then looked toward the thousands of figures kneeling in the training field. She frowned and asked, shouldn't we be receiving 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid per year? And with the territories we govern, we should also receive nearly 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid annually. How could that not be enough? Tang Ro opened her mouth but hesitated, then was shot a glare by Tang Bing and could only close her mouth. Little Binger, you speak, Nether said, having noticed their subtle movements. Her tone grew colder. Tang Bing could only force a bitter smile and say, Nether, ever since you left, some others have said that Nether Palace is not worthy of its name and that it can't become a true royal-level force in the great Luo Heaven domain. So they united to submit a petition to the Elder Council to dissolve Nether Palace. However, because Heavenly Vulture Emperor spoke on our behalf, Nether Palace managed to stay. But our annual tribute has been reduced from 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid to only 5,000. And many of the prosperous cities under our control have been secretly taken over by other adults. We're too weak to compete with them and can only swallow our anger. Because of all this, the total amount of supreme spiritual liquid we can use each year doesn't exceed 5,000 drops. Tang Ro also spoke in a low voice. Yes, sister needs a large amount of supreme spiritual liquid to break through to the Supreme Realm, so she's been delaying her breakthrough. Every drop of supreme spiritual liquid has been given to everyone else. That's why her cultivation has been delayed. The Nether's pretty eyes glared angrily, her delicate face full of fury. Her ample, smooth chest gently rose and fell, clearly showing that she was greatly upset. She hadn't expected that once she left, those bastards would dare to exploit Nether Palace like this. Of course, she knew that the other adults, mentioned by Tang Bing, and the others were the other kings. When she was still here, those guys were dissatisfied because of her insufficient strength, even though she held the same position as them. However, due to her background, no one dared to say anything. But now that she was gone, these bastards couldn't hold back anymore. Nether's face was frozen with coldness, and an immense spiritual pressure uncontrollably swept out, instantly causing many people in the training field to collapse to the ground, unable to withstand the pressure. Tang Bing was also pushed back a few steps by the spiritual pressure, but instead of fear, her face was filled with joy as she looked at Nether and exclaimed, Sister Nether, you successfully survived the tribulation? The spiritual pressure emanating from Nether now was no weaker than that of the other 8 kings. It seemed that, during the years she had been missing, Nether had successfully undergone the tribulation. Nether nodded lightly, waving her jade hand. In a deep voice, she said, You all leave for now. No matter the grievances you've suffered before, Now that this palace master is back, no one will dare to bully Nine Nether Palace again. Her words were directed at the people of Nine Nether Palace gathered in the plaza. Yes. Upon hearing her words, the people of Nine Nether Palace were immediately excited, responding in unison, before leaving in an orderly manner. Each of them had an excited look in their eyes. Nine Nether Palace finally had someone backing them up again, and the past humiliations could now be thrown away. As the plaza grew quiet, the frost on Nine Nether's pretty face gradually dissipated. She waved her hand and said, "Mu Chun, come out." Tang Bing and Tang Ro were stunned for a moment, then saw a shadow of light streak towards them, finally appearing beside Nine Nether. Mu Chun revealed himself and greeted Tang Bing and Tang Ro with a friendly smile. Tang Ro, a little shy, quickly averted her gaze when she made eye contact with Mu Chun, while Tang Bing, appearing somewhat wary, fixed her gaze on him. After what had happened with Chao Feng, she seemed to be cautious of any man approaching Nine Nether. "This is Mu Chun. I managed to survive the tribulation thanks to his help." Nine Nether's slender jade finger pointed at the two women. "This is Tang Bing and Tang Ro. They are my sisters." Upon hearing that Mu Chun had helped Nine Nether with such a significant task, Tang Ro held back her shyness and looked at him with gratitude. Tang Bing also gave Mu Chun a closer look and then gave him a slight nod, showing some reluctant approval. "Little Binger, how much supreme spiritual liquid do you need to break through to the supreme stage?" Nine Nether suddenly asked. "At least 1,000 drops." Tang Bing hesitated before answering as low as possible. Mu Chun smiled upon hearing this, then clenched his fist. A glowing jade bottle appeared in his hand, which he handed to Tang Bing, saying, "Sister Tang Bing, there are 2,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid in here. It should be enough for your breakthrough." After obtaining the Sumeru bracelet from Liu Ming, Mu Chun had gained a considerable amount of supreme spiritual liquid, so he was generous in offering it. Tang Bing was taken aback, but she didn't take it immediately. Her eyes turned toward Nine Nether, and when she saw her nod slightly, she gently accepted it. The coldness on her face softened a little, and she thanked Mu Chun softly. "Thank you. From now on, Mu Chun will also be a part of Nine Nether Palace. We are all one family." Nine Nether smiled as she held the hands of the two sisters. "I plan to have Mu Chun compete for the Great Luo Golden Pool, using one of our Nine Nether Palace leadership spots. Do you have any objections?" Tang Bing and Tang Ro were both stunned again. They exchanged a look, hesitating to speak. "What's wrong? Is Little Binger planning to go as well?" Nine Nether asked, her brow raised in curiosity. "No. Of course, it's up to you, sister." Tang Bing quickly shook her head, hesitating for a moment before giving a bitter smile. "A few years ago, the Great Luo Golden Pool spot for our Nine Nether Palace was forcibly bought by the Blood Eagle King using 1,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. We had no way to oppose it, so our Nine Nether Palace hasn't had the chance to compete for the Great Luo Golden Pool for a long time." When she finished speaking, Nine Nether's pretty face completely turned cold. Her silver teeth gritted, her beautiful eyes blazing with fury. That bastard Blood Eagle King truly had gone too far. In front of the palace, Nine Nether's face was covered in frost, her eyes filled with blazing anger. Mu Chun also furrowed his brow slightly at the side. It seemed that this so-called Blood Hawk King was indeed no good. The actions he had taken were truly despicable. The full, soft chest of the Nine Nether gently rose and fell, and soon she managed to calm her anger. Her voice gradually became more composed, but the coldness within it was hard to conceal. "From now on, the spots are ours to reclaim. Tomorrow, I will attend the Nine Kings Assembly and let them know that Nine Nether is back. Let's see who dares to stand in our way from now on. Anyone who has taken something from Nine Nether Palace must return everything." Tang Bing and Tang Ro both nodded, their eyes filled with joy. Now that Nine Nether had successfully passed the tribulation and returned, her strength had soared, and she was no weaker than any of the other 8 kings. Nine Nether Palace finally had someone they could rely on. "Little Binger, how many of the commanders in the Great Luo Heaven Domain are qualified to compete for a spot in the Great Luo Golden Pool?" Nine Nether turned her gaze to Tang Bing and asked. If Mu Chun wanted to enter the Great Luo Golden Pool, he would have to defeat those competitors, so she had to make sure Mu Chun understood just how powerful his opponents would be. Tang Bing glanced at Mu Chun, who was standing next to Nine Nether. Her eyes were stunning. When her eyes were cold, it gave her a distant, aloof feeling. However, when there was any other emotion in them, those beautiful eyes became lively, almost flirtatious, and utterly captivating. At this moment, the gaze she directed at Mu Chun was filled with doubt. The oppressive aura she sensed from him seemed to fall short compared to the renowned commanders in the great Luo Heaven domain. She doubted whether Mu Chun truly had the qualifications to compete with these talented commanders. However, despite her doubts, she still answered seriously. Currently, there are 18 commanders in the great Luo Heaven domain, all under the other 8 kings. 9 Nether Palace used to have one, but now, the one she referred to as used to have was naturally Chao Feng, who had already left 9 Nether Palace. 9 Nether nodded slightly, her face calm. Among these 18 commanders, the most famous are the 4 great commanders. The leader of the 4 is Su Qing, under the Xun'er king. He has already advanced to the 2nd grade supreme. I think perhaps 9 Nether sister has some impression of him, Tang Bing said with a slight smile. Su Qing. 9 Nether was slightly stunned upon hearing the name. She was surprised and said, I didn't expect that insignificant boy from back then would become so powerful. Hee. 9 Nether sister. It said that Su Qing has always had a thing for you. Over the years, many talented girls in the great Luo Heaven domain have admired him, but none have ever stirred his heart. Tang Ro covered her mouth and chuckled. 9 Nether lightly flicked Tang Ro's smooth forehead with her slender jade finger and said, Nonsense. I haven't had much contact with him. Little Binger, continue. The 2nd of the 4 great commanders is Zhou Yu, under the Mountain Splitter King. Tang Bing paused before continuing. The 3rd is Wu Tian, under the Bloodhawk King. He was brought back to the great Luo Heaven domain by Bloodhawk King a few years ago. In just a few short years, Wu Tian has risen to become one of the 4 great commanders. His promotion speed is truly remarkable. 9 Nether nodded slightly and asked, What about the 4th? Tang Bing's lips moved slightly, and after a brief pause, she whispered, The 4th is also under the Bloodhawk King. 9 Nether's beautiful eyes narrowed, and she said coldly, Chao Feng? Tang Bing nodded gently. Seems like he really found the right backer. In just a few years, he climbed to this level, 9 Nether said calmly. That young man certainly possessed extraordinary talent, or else she would not have promoted him to the position of commander in 9 Nether Palace back then. Of the top 3 among the 4 great commanders, they should all possess 2nd grade supreme strength. As for Chao Feng, it's said that he is at the peak of 1st grade supreme and could advance to 2nd grade supreme at any moment. So he has almost no rivals among the 1st grade supremes. Tang Bing glanced at Mu Chun and said, The spots for the Great Luo Golden Pool are limited to just 4. So, if he wants to qualify, he must defeat one of the 4 great commanders. Mu Chun nodded slightly. Tang Bing's meaning was clear. Among the 4 great commanders, Chao Feng was the weakest. So, if he wanted to qualify for the Great Luo Golden Pool, Tang Bing clearly didn't think Mu Chun could achieve this, though she also disliked that guy. However, Chao Feng's rise to the position of one of the 4 great commanders did prove he had some considerable abilities. How is it? Do you have confidence? If not, we can give up this time, Jiuyo said, tilting her head and giving Mu Chun a faint smile. Mu Chun looked into Jiuyo's eyes. Deep within that seemingly calm gaze, there was a hint of expectation. If he said he lacked confidence and refused, she would likely feel a bit disappointed. Although I still don't know how powerful those so-called 4 great commanders are, I've never feared an Earth Supreme. What's more, how could I fear some 2nd grade Supremes? A smile appeared on Mu Chun's handsome face as he spoke. Don't worry, Jiuyo, the Great Luo Golden Pool will definitely have a share for our 9 Nether's palace. Jiuyo slightly raised her brows, remaining silent. But a bright smile couldn't help but emerge on her face. Tang Ro, standing nearby, looked at Mu Chun with some surprise at his confidence, while Tang Bing observed him with a scrutinizing look. Such courage was admirable, but the qualification for the Great Luo Golden Pool wasn't something one could earn simply by being brave. Jiuyo didn't say much more, turning to head toward the palace. However, just as she was about to enter, her steps paused and a soft voice echoed. Since you've said that, no matter how difficult it is to obtain the spot, I will make sure you get it." Her voice trailed off as she entered the hall, while Tang Rou shot a curious glance at Mu Chun before quickly following her. Mu Chun leaned against a pillar, watching Jiuyo's graceful figure disappear, a smile tugging at his lips. His eyes revealed a touch of gratitude. Since leaving the northern San continent, Jiuyo had been planning for him, knowing his goals, and doing everything within her power to pave a path for him. A path toward becoming a peerless powerhouse. "Looks like Jiuyo's sister cares for you a lot," Tang Bing said, standing nearby. Her once icy gaze now fixed on Mu Chun. Her jade-like arm crossed over her chest, and though she wore slightly loose training clothes, the posture still accentuated the curves of her chest. "What is your relationship with Jiuyo's sister?" Tang Bing studied Mu Chun. Over the years, she had been in charge of Nine Nether's palace, so she naturally exuded an aura of authority. Her scrutinizing gaze also had a slight pressure to it. However, her scrutiny clearly had little effect on Mu Chun. He smiled at Tang Bing and replied, "Even if I get seriously injured, I won't let her get hurt." By the way, Mu Chun didn't elaborate further. He changed the subject and said softly, "Tang Bing sis, do you think it will be difficult for Jiuyo to reclaim that commander position? The Great Luo Heavenly Domain only has the 9 kings, and each king only has one spot. That Bloodhawk King took our 9 Nether's palace's spot. Over the years, he's enjoyed the benefits. Do you think he will easily give it up?" Tang Bing furrowed her brows and said, "Although Jiuyo's sister has the support of the Heavenly Vulture Emperor, the Great Luo Heavenly Domain isn't solely under the control of the Heavenly Vulture Emperor. Otherwise, 9 Nether's palace wouldn't have been in such a bad situation all these years. So, the 9 Kings' assembly tomorrow probably won't be very peaceful." Tang Bing paused, her beautiful eyes fixed on Mu Chun. "Jiuyo's sister cares for you, but I hope you're not another Chao Feng. Otherwise, no matter whether Jiuyo's sister tries to stop me or not, I won't let you off." Mu Chun scratched his nose and smiled. "Tang Bing sis, you're actually quite pretty when you threaten people." Tang Bing's large eyes widened in surprise. She glared at the smiling boy before her. This guy was actually flirting with her while she was being serious? In the past, when she was at 9 Nether's palace, her seriousness and strictness made everyone fear her. No one dared to speak to her like this. So for a moment, facing Mu Chun's playful remarks, she was left a bit flustered. "Don't worry, Tang Bing sis, that Chao Feng." Mu Chun exhaled lightly. When Tang Bing's brows furrowed, he smiled faintly, but his smile carried a cold glint. "I won't let him off." Though Jiuyo didn't seem visibly shaken by Chao Feng's betrayal, Mu Chun could still see the faint sadness in her eyes. Being betrayed was never a pleasant feeling. Tang Bing was stunned. She stared at Mu Chun and hesitated for a moment before saying, "As long as you have that intention, that's good. But Chao Feng is no simple character. Be careful." Mu Chun smiled and nodded. Then, looking around, he said, "Tang Bing sis, take me around. I'll be a part of 9 Nether's palace from now on." Tang Bing shot him a glare, clearly displeased, but she didn't refuse. With a turn, she walked away, and Mu Chun, smiling, followed closely behind. The next day, it was still early in the morning when a crowd had already gathered before the main hall of 9 Nether Palace, waiting quietly. The massive palace doors slowly creaked open, and a slender, graceful figure stepped out. The figure was dressed in form-fitting black battle armor that clung to her curvaceous body, accentuating her graceful silhouette. On the armor, intricate patterns resembling the soaring Nether Phoenix were engraved. This figure was, of course, 9 Nether. But today, she seemed different. There was an added air of heroic elegance. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her brows carried a hint of authority. "All hail our queen." In front of 9 Nether Palace, over 1,000 of 9 Nether Palace's followers immediately knelt on one knee, their voices rising in unison, full of excitement and respect. 9 Nether glanced around with her beautiful eyes, giving a slight nod. Behind her, Mu Chun, Tang Bing, and Tang Rou stood in silence. "Let's go. It's time to meet those old faces. Tell them, anyone who dares take something from our 9 Nether Palace better return it, or else." A cold glint flashed in 9 Nether's eyes. She then waved her hand, and her figure transformed into a streak of light, shooting forward.